Let's take a look at a sample migration. Here for the sample migration, we have a JBoss theme-based application called DVD Store application, which is part of EAP 5. And then we're trying to migrate to EAP 6, and we're going to show you the steps. And you find it under the lab install folder. So here in your lab install folder, there's a DVD store. And as you can see under DVD store, you have the JBoss theme DVD store EAP file EAP 5 version, and here's the EAP 6 version. Both of them are provided for you. And then I have unzipped these both of these folders here, so you can actually see those directory structure. So it's EAP file consists of a WAR file, an EJB jar file. So WAR file and EJB jar file part of this EAP file here. And then we'll take a look at how the migration steps are. First of all, remove any class loader configuration. So in the JBoss app XML file. So part of the JBoss app XML file in the EAP file meta-inf folder, as you can see here. Remove this loader repository section. So remove that part. That will take care of that EAP 5.1. So basically that's mainly used for class loading isolation, and the EAP 6 you don't need that. Each application, each extensions will have its own class loaders, so you don't need that any longer. Second step, update the JPA settings. Let's take a look at the changes you make over from the Hibernate CFG file to the persistent XML file, which is right here. Let's take a look at that. So Hibernate CFG, you have the cache provider class that should be removed and then replace in the persistent XML file. So I have commented that out and replace with the option here for the second level cache for queries and for any other properties for Hibernate you can able to include, like Hibernate show SQL false here in this example here. So you can able to provide any other Hibernate property, but you need to remove this cache provider class. So that's one of the changes here. And then step 3 here, the JBoss deployment structure XML file. Let's take a look at that one here. JBoss deployment structure XML file. So for the EAP file application, we exclude the JSF phases and the Sun JSF implementation, the main one, the 2.01. And then dependencies, we include the Apache ones plus the JSF 1.2 version. That's what we're including. And for the WAR, which is actually a sub-deployment, a modules inside this EAP file, for this one we actually exclude the main slot JSF API and the ComSun implementation and include the 1.2. So the idea behind that, for each one of the modules that you have here within the application, like EJB jar is a sub-deployment or WAR file a sub-deployment, you can have in a particular exclusion and inclusion or dependencies. You can establish those in the deployment JBoss deployment structure XML file. And the next step here, as you can notice here, any jar files typically throw it in the lib folder. Now you actually will end up replacing them in the lib folder of the EAP file. So in the EAP 5 EAP file, in this one lib folder, you include all the jar files that typically goes into the EAP 5 lib folder. And then steps 5 is updating the JNDI name information. So the JNDI name informations in the component XML file for the application, for example. In the EAP 5, we are not using the proper convention. Java E6 convention is just Java E5. There's no specific convention or restriction in place in Java E5. In Java E6 for the EAP 5, we need to use the proper convention with the Java :app prefix for the application, for EJBs, for example. And also for the data sources, for example, in the EAP 5, we're simply using a Java : here. It must be replaced with Java : JBoss. So you need to configure that. And also you have to make the necessary changes in the from the Hibernate CFG file when it comes to JNDI. As you can notice here, the connection data source for the Hibernate, it using the Java colon, and must in the persistent XML file it must be replace it with Java colon global or Java colon JBoss, and to replace with those option. So that is the Java E6 convention. And then also you need to define the data source depending on how you're starting your JBoss, whether it's a standalone mode or domain mode in the appropriate XML file, domain XML or standalone XML file. You need to include the data source tag for the Java colon global DVD data store under the data source subsystem. So a part of the subsystem you need to include this. Just like one the unit 6 we went through how to configure a data source. And then step 8, deploy the database driver. As a Java-based deployment, instead of configuring as a module, just simply deploy the Java file just like an application deployment. Just deploy that and then set up the database files. So once you do that, you can able to have the application running on EAP6. So that's actually concludes the sample migration.